Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Canopy Cast with your hosts Christopher McGurn, John Michael Price, and Michael O'Connor. Canopy Cast is a guest-based podcast that showcases an ecosystem of expertise through thought leadership and innovation. We bring people together to provide value for our audience through impactful stories and experiences. Canopy Cast, an ecosystem of expertise. Today's episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books entrepreneurs on top podcasts. Get on-demand podcast placements scheduled for you by professionals for a flat monthly rate. Where are you in your entrepreneur journey? Validation? Launch? Traction? Scale? Wherever you are, podcasts will take you further. We ain't talking about small talk, we're talking about the good stuff. Real, actionable communication. Find out more and apply today at kitcaster.com.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Canopy Cast. This is Michael O'Connor, one of your co-hosts here with my two other co-hosts, Mr. John Michael Price and Mr. Christopher McGurn. We are joined today by Mr. Ryan Frederick. Ryan Frederick is a product and company builder, a data and analytics problem solver, a nonprofit launcher and leader, investor, speaker, and best-selling author of The Founder's Manual. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. This is the first podcast that I've been on where there is a panel of hosts. And so I'm a little bit intimidated, as we talked about before we started officially recording. So, hopefully if I get nervous, hopefully my dog will come into the room and console me through the process.
I love how much people bring that up. It's fantastic. There's almost every guest, either like on air or like before we start, everyone's just like, there's three of you. Oh, this is interesting. This is different. I've never experienced that. I love it.
Yeah, as long as you don't gang up on me and there aren't like tiers and layers, to a question. Like
we didn't tell you this is a roast? No,
right. There's the Michael layer, then there's the John layer, then there's the Chris layer. At some point I will fatigue and I will get worn out.
We no layers. We won't do any layers on you today.
Okay, sweet.
I guess just to start off with, we just have a conversation. And for our listeners and viewers, we always usually start off with just the most open-ended question in the world, which is essentially, who is Ryan Frederick? Where have you come from? Where are you now? And where are you going?
Well, the joke that I've started telling is that I was born in a shed in upstate New York. It was not a shed, actually. I was actually born in a hospital, but I'm from a small town in upstate New York, typical rural country kid upbringing. And, then sort of, found my way to the big city in Columbus. Chris knows a little bit about Columbus. It's probably the biggest small city anybody's ever been to. But for a kid coming from a small town in upstate New York, it felt like a metropolis and it was super intimidating. And then just got really lucky and fortunate. I knew I was not a big company person. And so I joined, what at the time was a small business, but what we would now call a startup. We were just trying to, validate that we were onto something and get a little bit of traction and viability around it. And then met some people and met some investors and saw another problem. And one of those investors said, yep, I'll support that. And so we went off and started working on that. And then and then just identified some other problems and had access to some other opportunities. And now I'm a partner in a product and data consulting firm, and we build products for clients across the spectrum of startups to mid-market to enterprises and help them with data challenges. And then, maybe foolishly, started putting some thoughts down on paper, actually in Evernote, because I can't even read my own handwriting, but that's a whole other topic of conversation. And then, presented it to a publisher, and initially they rejected it. And they said, because it's based upon this premise of flow and figuring out what the principles are in something so that you can increase your odds of success and performance around it. So I was working on being a founder, building a product and starting a company around some principles under the guise of flow. And the publisher initially was like, I don't get this. I don't think we want to do this. And somehow I, turned it back around and they decided to do it. And now we're kind of pals, and we're working on another one together. So all of this has been very much unexpected. And, I don't think that I ever envisioned that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, or even have, been a part of what I've been a part of, but it just sort of kept, building on itself. So it's been fun. It's been a blast.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic.
Quick question. My dad's actually from upstate New York. What town were you from?
Johnstown.
Don't know that one. My dad was from like Hopewell Junction area. I don't know if you've heard of it. I know that's another really small town up north. But
yeah, I've not heard of it. But I was born in Johnstown, and there is a Johnstown in every state, I've now learned, and so I happen to draw the card of being from Johnston, the one in New York. So that's also very vanilla to be from Johnstown, because you could be from a Johnstown in any state, and I just happened to pick the New York one.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And two quick follow-ups from me as well. So I am in Cleveland. So like you're saying, the kind of small big towns in Ohio are very interesting. And then it's amazing that you mentioned like the principle of flow. I actually just today cracked into the book Flow, which I've been meaning to read for years now. So that's a little serendipitous right there. But my first.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah. First question for you. I noticed, as you're kind of explaining, especially in the early stages, you said like, you started working at this small business, but you called yourself a startup because that was kind of the way to garner more interest. That's actually come up kind of in some of our previous podcasts of people talking about, what is the difference between a small business and a startup, and like, is it mentality? Is it execution? Like, what's going on there? I'd love to, before we kind of dig more into, what you're doing now or stuff, I'd love to, I guess, just throw that question at you. Like, what's the difference between a small business and a startup to you?
Yeah, I'm not really sure that I have the answer either. But the way that I've always looked at it is, if you're a startup, you have a vision of growth and a vision of sort of impact that belies your size, right? Where a small business is categorized as a small business because probably going to have a small team, probably going to serve, even if they serve lots of customers, like a bakery might, for example, or that's probably a terrible example, but let's run with it. The impact and the footprint of that small business is small. A startup, even though it starts out with a very small footprint, the desire and the goal is for the footprint of that startup to be much more impactful and much broader than what a small business's vision and sort of impact footprint is. And we were an online service. This company was an online service that we were kind of a mini LexisNexis. For those that are familiar with LexisNexis, they're an online service that mostly serves law firms and attorneys with case law, historical case law. We built an online service that accessed other kinds of information, public records like Secretary of State filings and UCC filings and driving records, et cetera. And we knew that we ultimately had to acquire thousands of customers, if not tens of thousands of customers and users for it to be viable. So we knew that our footprint had to be pretty significant, or the business just wasn't going to fundamentally work.
I love that. I love the whole, just the point that you brought up, right? Of there's the small business, which is more of a smaller footprint, so to speak, and then the startup has like the big vision to have a bigger impact. I think that's really important to see that. And I've never really thought about it that way. I think that's really interesting, but I definitely see what you're saying with that. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's not even just about the money, right? Because I think people confuse, and that's why I don't really like the term lifestyle business either. Because there are some people running lifestyle businesses that, believe me, have very good lifestyles. They have exceptional lifestyles. So lifestyle business, gets a sort of a bad name inside of startup and venture. But there are some lifestyle businesses that most people, would want to have and be the owner of that quote unquote lifestyle business. And so for me, it's not about the money as much as it is what is the sort of exponential potential, right, of the team and of the product. A small business has governors on that, where a startup is trying to remove those governors, right? And that's why most of the biggest startups that everybody would be familiar with that have now become household names are mostly in the software space, because that's the area of the universe and commerce that it's easiest to take the governors off, right? And that sort of correlates to your ability to then have a much larger impact and footprint.
Yeah, that's a fascinating definition. I think that's right on the money, like Chris was saying. Yeah, I think a lot of people will not necessarily think about that necessarily when they're starting something. Whether it's a small business or a startup, and kind of what it's meant to be. I feel like a lot of founders can struggle with that, or can kind of have difficulty in that kind of mentality shift. But that, yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I will say too, and I write about this in the book, The Founder's Manual, that we also get tripped up a lot thinking about scale too early, though. And so I see a lot of founders and a lot of startups that are so desperate for scale and to scale quickly that they lose sight of the fact that if you don't, scale is about applying heat to a kernel and then having that pop so that you can take advantage of that, right? And you can serve more people, et cetera. But until you have that kernel that you can apply heat to, scale doesn't really matter that much. And I see lots of people talking about scale, thinking about scale, building their product to scale, and they don't have any users yet. They don't have any customers. And so scale can also be a little bit of an elusive but alluring sort of concept that people also have to be really guarded against. Are they working towards scale at the hindrance of being focused on solving a problem that people care about and value, and that they have validation around that?
Yeah, and a great transition to what was going to be my next question was, regarding your first book, The Founder's Manual. What was the process of, the inspiration for writing it? What were kind of the experiences that shaped you in a way that, you started writing down the notes, or the Evernotes there.
Right.
What was the process like?
It really started out very sort of innocuously. I became interested in flow, a decade ago, started consuming, almost everything I could about it. And I like virtually all sports, and I like outdoor adventure activities, rock climbing, mountain biking, kayaking, etc. And Stephen Kotler wrote a book called The Rise of Superman, which is flow with outdoor adventure athletes. And so I started to even think more about flow and how it related to the things that I enjoyed. And then I started to think about, well, how does flow relate to professional things? And then how does it relate to the professional things that I have experience with and that I'm also interested in, building products, being a founder, starting companies. And then I just started to write down some principles of things that I thought that if people sort of knew what they were and had a little bit of context around them, it might help people to increase their odds of being successful as a founder and with a product and with a startup. And that's really what the book manifested into.
That's amazing. What was it always fascinates me in terms of, was there a moment where you decided that you were going to write the book? Was there a moment of experience or an aha, or was it a gradual, like, I think I might do this? And it's like, okay, I'm starting this, and it's like, I'm finishing this. Or was there a defining moment?
I think that there was a kind of a defining moment when I started to write out what I thought might be good chapter titles in my initial outline, and some concepts, and then I came to a chapter where I titled it "Run to the Fire," and then I started to even sketch out some concepts for that chapter. And the chapters in the book are not long because I intentionally did not want it to be too verbose and too wordy, because I wanted the principles to be pretty concise and direct. And when I wrote that title and then I started putting some concepts into that chapter for the book, that's when I said, all right, I really feel like I should do this and actually write the book and sort of, flush this out more and have it become something. Because that was one of the concepts that when I wrote the title and started jotting down some of the ideas to go into the chapter, I felt that people really needed to hear that and to take ownership of it. Because if you're not someone who is wired to, what, as I put it, run to the fire, which in a startup context means you can't avoid problems, right? You have to run to the problems, deal with them head on, because if you put your head in the sand or run away from them, I think you have zero chance of being a successful entrepreneur and having a successful startup. But most people, we're not innately wired to run to the fire. We're not innately wired to seek out problems and to run to them. And that's also how we know whether we're cut out to be an entrepreneur or not, because if we can overcome that and we can get comfortable actually running headlong into problems, then maybe we have a chance of being a successful founder. So that was sort of the linchpin for me, where I was like, because I never really heard anybody talk about founders in that context, founders being problem solvers and founders having to be willing to and able to overcome this need really to be able to run toward problems instead of away from them.
That's fascinating. And where, at what points in your life did you kind of learn those lessons for yourselves, to kind of express that to others as an incredible gift? Like what were the moments that taught you that?
Yeah, they were the moments where I probably didn't run to problems, right? And to some degree, hoped that they were going to solve themselves and then paid a price, right, for not doing it. And then I've also observed a lot of people over the years who didn't run to problems, and they avoided those problems. And when I would point that out to them, or when I would talk to them about it, they clearly, it was a deeper representation of the fact that they shouldn't be a founder, and they weren't wired to succeed as a founder. And so I think that there are some signs of whether someone should be a founder and should be an entrepreneur or not. And I think that's one of them. If you are not prepared to deal with an unending series of problems, and not only sort of pick yourself up every day and prepare to run that gauntlet again, even though that's exactly what you did the day before and the day before that and the day before that, you're probably not gonna ultimately have the stamina, to see a startup through, because a startup and coming to market with a new product is just an unending series of problems every day. The problems change and evolve over time, but it's an unending stream of problems. And if you don't sort of thrive on that, and if you don't develop a mentality of learning how to live with that and actually get sort of good at it and prioritize effectively inside of it, et cetera, then you're probably not going to be that successful as a founder or an entrepreneur. And I just saw lots of people that were founders, were entrepreneurs that didn't have that mentality. And I now I can sort of see that it's a key ingredient. And if they don't have it, they're probably not going to be successful.
I've seen a close parallel with that too. Just in sports, especially people who are wanting to go professional, and I think all three of us have seen a large parallel between successful entrepreneurs and people who were very accelerated in sports at a young age, and also those that were in the military and then decided to start businesses. And I think it's all a similar mentality of you have to continue to get up over and over and over again. And I've worked with, oddly enough, a lot of really successful entrepreneurs who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So that's one of my favorite hobbies. And that is one thing where you go into that and you just get beat up and destroyed over and over and over again. And you go there for 6 months and you feel like there's no way out. And then you start getting these little glimmers of hope and you're like, I can do this. And I think there's a really big parallel to that. And the perseverance of being able to go through.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's one of the reasons that I like outdoor adventure activities because, I think that there's some correlation that if you like challenging yourself in other aspects of life, then you might be wired and you might have a chance at being successful, challenging yourself from a business perspective, as a founder. Because being a founder is the hardest professional thing that anybody can do, because you have to be the first best marketer for the company, the first best salesperson, the first best product person, the first accountant, right? You have to be a great storyteller because you might have to raise money, you're gonna have to recruit a team, you're gonna have to recruit co-founders, you have to deal with risk and all of the problems that we've already that we've sort of broken down a little bit already. And if you're undisciplined, you are going to break under the weight of all of that. And people who are used to being challenged are not only used to facing the difficulties as part of those challenges, but dealing with those challenges creates discipline, and they become very disciplined people. And I would bet on a founder who is not as smart, not as skilled, but is incredibly intentional and disciplined over somebody who's a little bit smarter and a little bit more skilled, because smart, skilled people who are undisciplined are not, in my experience, are not going to be able to build a successful company. Somebody who's intentional and disciplined and who's still reasonably smart, reasonably skilled is more likely to build a successful company.
So what do you do when you come across somebody who's extremely intelligent and skilled and has a lot of discipline?
And they have a lot of discipline?
Yeah.
Then I'm going to talk to them about my product company building their product and about us potentially becoming investors or me investing.
Yeah, I think
it's pretty rare, actually, because look, most people are undisciplined, right? Because and when I do workshops on some of this stuff at conferences, one of the things that I say is, I know that most of you are undisciplined because there's only two keys to being relatively fit and healthy, right? One is eat reasonably good food in reasonable portions and get a reasonable amount of strenuous exercise. That's it. There's two fundamental principles, and we all know what they are. And then I say to the audience, okay, can we all agree those are the two principles? And everybody says, yeah. And then I say, okay, how many of you are as fit and healthy as you want to be in this moment? And 1% of the audience stands up. Yeah, there's only two principles. So we are undisciplined as a species, and it's very rare to find someone who is smart, skilled, and disciplined. Super rare.
Could you elaborate like what you mean by discipline? Like obviously, like I understand the definition of discipline, but like give us some examples of like when it comes to being an entrepreneur specifically and being disciplined in that sense. What does that look like on a tangible level, I guess?
Yeah, so it means understanding what you need to do and what the business calls for at any given moment, and whether you want to do that or whether you feel like doing it, you do it. And because, there are lots of hard conversations to be had and things to do inside of building a company, with investors, with customers, with team members. And if you don't consistently show up and do the things that the business is asking you to do in this moment, then eventually each one of those choices to not do it chips away, and then and I think you develop a discipline muscle through the process too, and that's why I like the attachment to sports and to outdoor adventure activities, because if you wake up if you say, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to go cycle for 10 miles, and you get up and do it, you've just now strengthened your discipline muscle, right? If you say the night before you're going to do that and then you don't get up and do it, you've just eroded your discipline muscle at the same level that you could have increased it if you had done it. The same thing happens professionally and for entrepreneurs, because if you're presented with a problem and you decide to not do anything about it, even though you know in your heart of hearts that this is the thing you need to be dealing with and working on in this moment, and you choose not to do it, you are undisciplined as a founder, and eventually that erodes you and it erodes the company over time.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, that kind of points towards the biggest thing that investors look for as well. Is, I've talked to a lot of people and they say, we don't invest in the idea, we invest in the people behind it. And they say you can have the greatest idea ever, but, most VCs won't touch a company that has, bad founders.
Yeah, because it all comes back to the people. Every product and every product, good or bad, is a reflection of the team that created it and is working on it. Every company is a reflection of the team inside of the product and inside of the company, and it's unavoidable. And the team is everything. And I look at startup teams as really being like a team of Navy SEALs, in that very small, but very with a lot of dexterity and high skill, right? So you've got somebody that is probably a fantastic engineer, or you've probably got a fantastic designer, or you've probably got somebody who's got some decent business development chops, etc. And everybody can switch out who's sort of the leader, right, depending on what the business needs at that moment. And when you think about it that way, it justifies why investors look at the team versus everything else. And there's lots of talk about markets and categories and investors having themes and all that sort of stuff, and a thesis for investing, and all of that's true. But ultimately, they invest in what team do they think is the most capable of bringing this new reality into to make it real. And it always comes down to the people. That's why investors bet on multi-time founders, even if those founders have failed previously, because failure doesn't necessarily, because look, most of these things are going to fail. So failure is not, that much of a scarlet letter, because most things are going to fail. It is, did the team operate, well? Did the team execute as they said they were going to? Were they flexible enough to sort of move and shift as they needed to, or were they super rigid? And investors look at those things, and just because something didn't work is less important than did the team perform well inside of the thing than ultimately not working for a myriad of reasons, why lots of things don't work. Something not working doesn't mean that it's a bad team. The timing could be off. It could be that there could have been regulatory changes. There could be a whole myriad of things, right, that cause something not to work. even if the team performs exceptionally well.
That's so true. That's so true. And that's the people. I feel like a lot of organizations, a lot of individuals forget, the value of the human capital. I mean, that's what makes the world go around. Is the people and the problems that people have and solving those problems for other people. I think, and like just kind of hearing from you, your perspective, your experience, it really sounds like, your book, The Founder's Manual, is speaking exactly to that. It's speaking to the people who are interested in that kind of thing. And I guess for, our viewers and listeners, what are a couple tips you could have for them? If they're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or just doing a better job in their careers or life, that kind of people aspect, what kind of tips do you have for them?
Yeah, I think the first one would be to become self-aware. Most of us are not that self-aware. We don't understand what makes us tick. We don't understand why we make the choices and decisions that we make. We don't understand what gets us emotional. And so I think you have very little chance of being a successful entrepreneur if you don't know how you work and how to manage yourself. Because it's too chaotic. The environment is too fluid for you to not know and understand yourself. And I think that's true I think that's true for anybody. I think it's just amplified for entrepreneurs because the environment is so intense. I think the second thing that I would say is once you have some level of self-awareness, then you have to sort of balance that out by checking your ego at the door. Because I think the best founders and the best products and then the best companies they never make it about themselves. It's always focused on the problem and customers and customer value and user value and impact. And they know that if they make it about the other things and not themselves, then they're serving the right end, and and it's not egotistically driven. We all see the celebrity founders who haven't really, done that much, and yet they seem to, grab every opportunity to, have a microphone and to be in an article, et cetera. And they make it about themselves. And I think that's a really slippery slope. And I rarely see a founder who makes it about themselves that ends up with a successful product and a successful company. And because even if you go back and sort of look in the archives at some of Jeff Bezos' early interviews, right? It was never, now, clearly, he's got a decent sized ego, right? Especially now, right? I mean, and I think any of us might, succumb to that, point if we were where Bezos is. But early on, it was, look, I'm just trying to democratize the way that people can get access to books, right? And then it went a little bit beyond books. And if you go back and look through those things, it's clearly, at least he had convinced himself that it wasn't about him. It was about the problem that he was trying to solve and the value that he was trying to create. And I think then you give yourself a shot to, to make something. So be self-aware, then keep your ego in check. And then I think the third component is you operate with intention and discipline ruthlessly. And we talked a little bit about the discipline and part of it. And I see a lot of narrative now around hustle and the hustle mantra and the hustle life. And I don't even know what any of that means. It makes for good, t-shirts, and it makes for good memes, and it makes for good, journal covers. But, that hustle narrative is, I think, damaging, and it's misguiding for a lot of people, because I think, hustle is an empty objective. what are you hustling around or to, or, because of? Intention and discipline are universal and universally honored and respected. If you show up every day and operate with discipline, the universe will respect that. And hustle is just this sort of very amorphous concept that I think is ultimately a little bit damaging. And I would rather see people get really focused, really intentional, and really disciplined than to say they're hustling. I don't know if any of that hustle discipline equation that I was just trying to create there made any sense, but hopefully it did.
It does. Makes sense. Yeah. Here's another question for you. Not really on the business front, but I actually love like the outdoors, camping, hiking, fishing, all of that kind of stuff. So I know you're in the Columbus area. Where do you go for all of that stuff? Do you go to Hocking Hills often? Is that where you like to go? Are there other places? Where do you like to go for that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I go all over. And I was just in Utah at Zion on Bryce 2 weeks ago and was hiking and traipsing around there. And then I've got trips coming up to Red River Gorge in Kentucky, and then Asheville is mid-August. But when I'm in Columbus, my favorite place to go hiking is a place, a little known place that's actually not far from, it's actually, I guess, considered in the Hocking Hills, but it's not the main parks in Hocking Hills. It's called Zaleski State Forest. And they've got, I don't know, 75 miles of trails there. There's a backpacking trail and backpacking campsites that you can backpack to and stay overnight. And it's very remote. It's very rural. It's typically not that crowded. Don't tell the rangers this, but I can let my dog off the leash and he can just sort of, run the trails because there aren't a lot of people around. And then Mohegan State Forest, north of Columbus, I like because there's decent hiking there. And they've got, I think, 25 miles of mountain bike trails in Mohegan. So I like to go there. So there's, one of the things I've learned is that you can go anywhere and enjoy, the outside. If you're intentional about it. Most people, want and this is another reason I like outdoor adventure activities, I think, is most people don't partake in them because they don't want to be uncomfortable. They only want to do them if the conditions are perfect, and the conditions are rarely perfect, right? Sometimes it might rain. Sometimes it's going to be too hot. Sometimes there's going to be a lot of bugs, et cetera. And I like knowing that I can challenge myself to do things that other people find uncomfortable and don't want to take the time to go do. And so that emboldens me to know that I've got a little bit of personal agency that I'm able to not only overcome those sort of discomforts, but embrace them to a degree and almost sort of say to a mountain bike trail or to a slope or to some rapids in a water, okay, bring it on and let's see what this is going to be about. And I think there's something to that.
I love that. Yep.
I gotta ask, what kind of dog do you have?
I was gonna ask her.
Yeah, he's a black lab mix. They think he is a mix with a chow because when I adopted him from the shelter, that's what they said. I don't really see the chow part, but I'm not a veterinarian, so I can't check. But he's not as big as your typical black lab, so he's clearly mixed with something that would be a little bit smaller. He's super sweet. When I adopted him from the shelter, he was he struggled to run. His back end was like tucked under him, and they thought that he had, when he was a puppy, like in his really early days, that he was kept in too confined to space. So he developed with his body sort of curved because they said that there wasn't anything like structurally wrong. And so they said, look, we don't know if it's going to get any better or not. And I said, it's okay. I'll still take him. So I take him running with me and hiking, and he grew out of it. And so he's, he could be the leader of the pack now. And he's super sweet. He's a great dog. I probably have a preference for dogs over people. Because, people complicated and messy, dogs, not so much. Right.
Yeah, that's funny you asked that, John. I was thinking of asking that. What kind of bike do you have? I'm actually really getting into biking, so I'm always asking people, like, what bikes do they have and what do they recommend?
Yeah, I just bought a new one. I bought a bike. It's a giant Trance. And it's either the Trance 2.0 or 20, as in the model year 20. I can't remember if there's a decimal point in there or not. A friend of mine owns a company that is a bike shop in Columbus. It's called Roll.
Okay.
And I don't know, they've got, 10 stores now, 12 stores maybe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
He's hooked me up with a couple of bikes, and I bought that one from him because he is an avid mountain biker in addition to owning the bike company. So I respected his opinion around it. And then my road bike is a felt. It's really a triathlon bike. I don't road cycle as much as I mountain bike. So I didn't want to spend as much money on the cycling bike. So I just went on a friend, turned me on to a Facebook group for people selling bikes. And so I bought it off of a kid at Ohio State for $600 because he had bought a new one because he was actively doing triathlons, and I'm not. So I got his $600 hand-me-down.
Awesome.
But it's still the nicest road bike that I've ever had, and it is. And it was the first time I rode it. It was just a reminder of how important having the right gear for an activity is, and how much more enjoyable having the right gear is. And so riding that road bike for the first time, I was like, oh, this is what it's like to actually ride something on asphalt that's meant to be ridden on asphalt. This is cool. Because it would be like, and you see this sometimes, you'll see people on a mountain bike trail with like not necessarily a road cycling bike,
gravel bike,
like a gravel bike, right?
Yep.
And you can see how much they're struggling, and it's like, oh geez, now I get it, because I was the same dude with a mountain bike, riding on a bike pass, right? And it's like, oh, look at this idiot.
You're like huffing and puffing, and everyone's flying past you, and you're just like, what's going on? Why am I
exactly? Why am I about to die? And that guy looks like he's going to go 50 more miles. Yeah. And I think it's just, it's a lesson, in lots of ways, even probably around business, that if you try to use the wrong gear, for the wrong thing, it's probably going to be arduous, and it's probably going to be way more difficult and painful than it needs to be.
Yeah. Speaking of pain, my question I ask everyone is like, what's up with biker butt? Like, it just hurts. Like unless you're doing it often enough, like your butt is always sore. So like, is that just something that you just kind of build up a callus, like the more you ride and then you just get over it? Like what happens? Like,
I think you do, because that's what's happened to me.
It hurts at first, and then you get used to it, and you're like, all right, I don't really feel it anymore.
Right. And I think it's an issue of nerve endings, right? Because I think we don't realize how many nerves and nerve endings we have in our butts until you ride a bike for a long time, and then you find it out. And then I think over time, those nerves and those nerve endings either just get calloused over, or they just get to the point of not being as sensitive, right, to the process and the pressure. So my 12-year-old son went with me to Utah a couple of weeks ago, and the shuttle at Zion was not working because of the pandemic, and they weren't starting it until the day after we were leaving to go to Bryce. So we had to rent bikes to ride up the road that's in Zion to get to the back of the park, like where the Narrows are. And 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 he goes bike riding with me, but not to to that extent. So we get up to where the last spot where you park to take the trail to the Narrows, and we get off, and I don't even know if I can say this on your podcast, but we get off the bikes, and he turns to me and he said, "My butt really hurts," and I said, "Yeah, mine too." And then he said, "And my balls too," and I was like, "Yeah, mine too." And I was like, and here's the really awesome part. Once we go hike the Narrows for like 4 miles, then we come back and we hop back on these puppies and we ride them for another 9 miles. So, it's, but one of the reasons I like him going on some of these outdoor adventure things with me, and we go hiking a lot together, and now he's getting into mountain biking too, and we go kayaking together and rock climbing. One of the reasons I like him doing these things with me is because he's learning to deal with discomfort, right? Because the world is not fair, and if you're going to grow and if you're going to have interesting experiences personally and professionally, you better not seek comfort, and you better get okay with being uncomfortable. And so him doing these outdoor adventure activities with me, I hope he's learning to deal with some discomfort, and that all discomfort is not the same. And over time, I hope for him, it gives him the same sense of, I biked and I hiked 22 miles one day in Zion, bring this problem on, because if I could do that, I can deal with this. And I want him to develop that mentality.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of my favorite quotes is you were not made for comfort, you were made for greatness. And it definitely applies here. So I love that.
Yeah. But everything in society and everything professionally is designed to facilitate comfort. Right. I mean, why does anyone go get a college degree in something? Because supposedly it equals a profession that is going to give them some security and some financial comfort. And you know what? I think we're now learning that's true in some cases, but is it a ticket to ongoing, professional and financial comfort? No, of course it's not. And I think that we need more people to seek discomfort and to challenge themselves than we need people seeking comfort, because I think seeking comfort is a road to people not challenging themselves, and not I don't know, and now I'm pontificating about lifelong premises, but I think that if you're going to ultimately live the life that you can, it's about challenging yourself. It's not about getting comfortable and then just phoning it in at some point. Just because you have a cushy job, I mean, who cares? I mean, right? I mean, money pays the bills, but if it's just something that you can show up every day, you don't have to think about, how interesting is that? I don't know. So, but that's also why I knew early on I was not a big company person, because that never appealed to me. I've always wanted to look, and I've had money and I've had absolutely zero, and where I've had companies go belly up and I had nothing, and it wasn't awesome, but I was also okay with it, and I'm okay with it now, because it at least I've tried some stuff and done some shit, and it's some of it's worked and some of it hasn't, but I don't regret any of it, and I think that I don't know. But with that said, most people should not be founders. Most people should not be entrepreneurs. It's a very small percentage of people that should start companies.
Fascinating topic of discussion. I feel like time is flying by, but I do want to get into your product company real quick while we still have some time. We've discussed it a little bit. I just think that's fascinating, taking ideas from, small startups to big enterprise level and kind of executing on them and creating the products that, everyone uses on a daily basis. What has been your experience in that? And what's that been like?
Yeah, it's been really cool. So I've been a partner at the firm now for 9 years. The firm's been around for 25, and it's interesting to sort of switch seats from being the sort of product, driver and owner, to being one where we're riding shotgun or in the back seat with somebody else who's the product driver and owner and who's trying to make something of a product and make it go. So that part's been really interesting and fascinating. It's also given me a look into um, how do people think about products differently, and how do different industries think about products differently, and what are the ramifications of that, and and it's not cookie cutter. Building a successful product in the health and fitness space is not the same as building a successful product in the manufacturing space. And so we have a lens, as many services firms do, so that we're not unique in this way, but we have a lens into lots of different industries and businesses and ways of thinking, that is really fascinating, because we get to sort of dig really deep when someone in a particular industry is building a software product, about the context around that product and the ramifications of the industry aspect of that product. And it's fun for us to be able to, and our team is made up of people that are much smarter and more capable than I am. And to watch them ply their craft for clients, to help clients accomplish what they want to accomplish with their product, is also really rewarding, because most of our clients, whether you're talking about a startup or a mid-market company or an enterprise, they typically come to us with a pretty murky and naive idea of what it takes to build a successful product, and our team helps them through that process, in addition to doing the wrenching on the product. So that's pretty cool to be a part of.
That's fantastic. That's such a unique kind of atmosphere, because I think for a lot of people, they think, oh, I have this idea, I want to make this product or whatever. Usually they'll have only a couple ideas, and they'll want to do this thing and see it come to fruition. But to have a whole organization that's dedicated to that step, that bringing things into actual fruition and creating these tangible things that are actually consumed and used as an entire business model, is just fantastic and fascinating.
Yeah, it's really, and I'm most happy for our team, because they're the ones that take something from being an intangible and very amorphous, right, to then bringing it to life. And I think product people, whether you're talking about architects or designers or developers, are creators and craftspeople, just like artists and songwriters and musicians and sculptors, right? That something doesn't exist and then they bring it into existence. And I look at product people in the same light, because although it's a digital sort of technical manifestation, it's now something that is tangible. It now exists, that didn't. And I think that creation process is just incredibly fascinating to watch and to be a part of. And I think there are lots of corollaries between the creation process around a digital product as there is around like a movie or a song. And because when you think about a digital product, you have designers for UX, UI expertise, and then engineers, right, from a code perspective, and then data engineers to make sure the data is flowing, as efficiently as possible and is secure. And, I could go down a whole DevOps people, right? I could go down a whole list of craftspeople that contribute to a digital product. And the same thing happens with like a movie, right? You've got a cinematographer, and you've got someone for the score, and you've got script writers, and you've got costume people. I just think there's lots of corollaries in between those creative endeavors and creating a new software product.
It's fantastic. Now, time has really flown past. This has been amazing. I want to give time.
Is that a polite way of saying I talk too much?
No, not at all. I want to give plenty of time for John Michael and Christopher. We have a thing where every episode we have to do final questions. So we have to go around and make sure that we're all satisfied. We do want to respect your time as well, so we got to have some time for that.
Well, as you know, I've got a car in the shop, so
Exactly.
I'm stranded, and and the guys have audience members, whoever's listening to this, the hosts have promised me that this is going to get released in 24 hours, so that I will sell enough books to be able to pay for my car repair that's in the shop right now. So if you don't see, it's now about 5:12 Eastern time on July 16th. If you are not seeing this out in the wild by 5:12 on 7/17, you know that they sold me a whole bill of goods to be on this podcast. No, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding about the car in the shop.
What will you do if we can get it up within 24 hours?
Oh, I will send
a mountain bike to each one of us. Please and thank you.
Well, my friend Stuart would be really happy. I will send, you guys don't want free books. Your audience, some of your audience members might want free books.
I want free books.
I always want free books.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll send you guys a copy of the book, and I'll send, 20 free books to 20 of your listeners. Actually, I'll do that regardless. So it doesn't matter about getting it on the next 24 hours. I'm just teasing you.
Wow.
I'll still send you the books.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, as far as final questions go, side tangent. I saw your dog sit down on that couch behind you. It's really cute.
Oh, did he come out?
Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, he's just chilling. What's the name?
His name is Ben.
That's a great dog name.
And that was his name at the shelter. And so when I adopted him, I was like, and he didn't know his name, so I could have changed it. But I was like, you know what? Ben's actually an okay name, so I kept it. And now of course he's got many names in addition to Ben. I don't know why as humans, as dog owners, we feel like our dogs have to have like 20 variations of their names that we use in different contexts. But that's also what's happened with Ben. So he's got 20 variations of his name that I call him at different points depending on what's going on.
Awesome. For last question for me, mine's going to be a little deep, but you mentioned that you had a lot of businesses, some fail, some be successful. What is the biggest obstacle that you have had to overcome in your time as an entrepreneur, that when upon seeing it for the first time you thought this is going to be the end of the company? And then perseverance and discipline, as you mentioned before, were what got you through that.
Yeah, I think it's probably, and this is ubiquitous, so this is not unique to me and to any of the companies I've been part of starting, is cash flow. Even if because as soon as you have payroll beyond yourself and you have a team that is depending on you, your ability to actually pay the team and make payroll is critical and is probably the highest stressor and level of anxiety that a founder or a founding team can have. I was actually talking to a friend of mine 2 nights ago, and he's got a startup now. This is his second one, well, probably more than a second one, but it follows a company that he was a part of starting that sold for $450 million, 6 years ago. So he knows he's capable of doing this and doing this successfully, as 450 million would indicate. But his current company is out of money. He's in between funding rounds, and He's, funding payroll out of his own personal coffers and, getting advances on, some of his retirement, accounts and other accounts. And it's just a reminder that this is irrespective of what you've done before. This never gets any easier. It never gets any better, because having success with one product and one company does not equate to having success with another company and another product. It is not cookie cutter. It's not rinse and repeat. The times are different. The products are different. You're trying to talk to customers in a different business and market than you were before, et cetera. And it's not rinse and repeat. And just talking to him about it, even though he's had a pretty high degree of success, he's now, in, not in a great place, with his current startup. And it's just a reminder that point of having cash or not having cash, it is an incredible personal and business stressor, and startups really are in two states typically. Either they don't have enough cash, or if they've raised some money, they probably have more cash than they need at that moment, right? There's almost very little in between, and either one of those situations is high anxiety and high stress, because if you've got more cash than you need because you've taken investment, now you have pressure to invest that money, to spend that cash, to expand the team, to market more aggressively, to sell more aggressively, to grow the company. Huge amount of anxiety, huge amount of stress, huge amount of pressure. It's somewhat better stress and pressure than having no cash, but still anxiety and pressure. So I would say that sort of startup cash conundrum is the one that never seems to really get that much easier for me or anybody else as part of all this.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. Yeah, that's a really good point. I love asking that question because you get so many different perspectives from entrepreneurs who all, it tells a lot about a person what stressed them out as well. Because a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, business founders, and they, it was interpersonal issues, and that was the most stressful thing we had to overcome. Other people, it's money, and it really just depends on person to person. So I always love asking that question.
What's the most interesting answer that you've gotten to that question? I mean, besides mine.
Kind of it was actually kind of the start to someone's answer themselves. I don't remember how we got on the subject, but we were actually in a podcast with Cynthia Delaria, who I'm actually going to meet for drinks after this. Networking is great. But yeah, we were talking, and she said that, everyone wants the unicorn, but no one wants to have to deal with the unicorn shit. And that, as the entrepreneur, you're really the mucker of the stalls. And she got going on her story about what she had to overcome and the giant pile of crap that her company kind of handed her. And so that was a really interesting situation that she was kind of outlining. But basically, to sum it up, she exited a company, really successful exit, and wanted to get into real estate, and invested a lot of money into real estate right before the market crashed in 2008, and just absolutely got timing. Tanked. Yeah, and so she ended up being really well off, and then going the other direction, being $600,000 in debt. Pretty much in a very short period of time. Her story of overcoming that was really interesting.
Yeah, and that just goes to show you that really smart, capable people sometimes end up on the wrong side of it. And it doesn't mean that they're less smart or less capable, right? I mean, it sometimes it just doesn't go your way and work in your favor. And it's not a statement about the person necessarily. And I will say too that the other thing that people lose sight of around like unicorns is if you're the founder of a unicorn, you are probably going to get so diluted through the process that by the time it gets to the point of being a unicorn, you're probably going to own like 1.25% of the company. And you know, there are a couple of rare instances, but you know, I think it was like when Dropbox IPO'd, and Aaron Levy, you know, it was revealed that he, you know, owns such a really small part of the company because they had raised so much, they had done so many rounds of funding and they had raised so much money, and everybody was sort of shocked. And it's like, that's the way this works, right? If you have to go raise a lot of investment and you have to do it multiple times, you're ultimately going to give up equity and you're going to get diluted. It's just part of the game. But most people don't sort of realize, you know, how the indoctrinated don't realize how the investment venture game really works and how it gets played. And not everybody that builds a really highly visible company ends up coming out of it, you know, with a yacht and a mansion.
And I guess just to wrap things up, my final question for you here. I know John Michael has to actually physically go and.
I know. I'm keeping him from his, you know, his happy hour. You know, now I feel guilty.
My final question: has there been a single favorite memory that you've had from either a colleague or an employee or a family member that is kind of tied into, you know, your professional life and what you've been doing?
Yeah, I had a sort of a mentor, and he ended up investing in a company that I wanted to start coming out of another company. And he told me two things that I really valued and have remembered to this day. And the first thing was, you can't, because I was sort of whining about some stuff one day, which was probably not a great idea to your lead investor to be doing that. But I was young and stupid. And wisely, he said, you know, two things to me in that same conversation. The first one was, you can't do a good deal with a bad person. And the second thing was, don't ever be jealous of somebody else's cookie jar because you don't know how they got the cookies in the jar. And the first one has proven to be true time after time after time, because if you think or you question whether you're about to do a deal with somebody that you're not sure if you can really trust or not, the answer is you probably can't trust them and you probably shouldn't be doing the deal. And the second one has rung true every time as well, because whenever I have become jealous of somebody else's cookie jar, and I've taken the ball off of my cookie jar and how I was getting cookies into my own cookie jar, that has also come back to bite me every time.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Words of profound wisdom from Mr. Ryan Frederick. Everyone, please go check out his book. Well, if you're lucky enough to be in the first 20 of our viewers and listeners to get the book, that would be fantastic. And if you're not, then go get it wherever you can get books. Ryan Frederick, thank you so much for your time. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Guys, thanks for having me. Enjoyed it very much.
And until next time, we'll see you next time.
That was the worst outro I have ever. Try again. You get one more try.